been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer and summer.
You talked about going to that convention.
Yeah, Vid Summit.
Maybe tell about Vid Summit just so there's a context. Because I think that's probably a good starting point if we're talking commerce and
commerce, art and commerce, or creativity and commerce. So I went to Vid Summit last year in Los Angeles, and Vid Summit is a big content creator, YouTube-centric event where, sort of being on YouTube is the center of everything, even though there may be people there who are on Instagram or TikTok and either wanting to learn more about YouTube or whatever. But the bulk of the presenters, the people that were actually having little, ballroom classes or, big speeches in front of everybody were all YouTubers. And, I didn't really do any research on like what the messaging was from Vid Summit, like what were these speakers going to talk about, what was going to be sort of the foundation of what your approach could or should be to content creation, especially on YouTube. And my big takeaway from the whole event was was on the little bit on more of the cringe side of things, because it felt like it's, again, this playbook of one of the presentations was these 7 steps that you can do to increase your audience on YouTube, essentially. And one of them that really made me have very yucky feelings was figure out a charity that you can involve in your channel that you can give to or do a fundraiser for or create a piece of content around getting funding to that charity. And that will bring more viewers into the fold. And the whole thing felt like it's all about these vanity metrics, like how many subscribers you have, how many views you get, breaking all these records. And for me, it's just, for me personally, it's just this sort of low-hanging fruit that people gravitate toward because of gamification. It's easy to understand a 1 out of 10 video versus a 10 out of 10 video, and million subscribers, a silver play button, gold play button, all that stuff. And so I just went away from it, just a little disappointed, and something that I've become more interested in as a creator is sort of shedding any feelings about this video was a 1 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10, or I didn't get this many views. Like, that stuff still has an impact sometimes on me emotionally, but for the most part, I just go, am I proud of this video? Did I make it for the right reasons? Especially because my content on my YouTube channel, my main YouTube channel, is tutorial content. It's essentially educational content, or, hey, do you know about this 16 millimeter camera and what you can do with it in comparison to a digital camera? So it's not like it's art in its truest form, where, like my brother, I bring up my brother all the time. He showed me his video. Oh man. My brother is like the definition of, to me, the other side of the Mr. Beast and the YouTube gamification spectrum. He is someone who just, this stuff pours out of him into a video, and I watched it and it was like 20 minutes long. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know what I just watched, but I couldn't stop watching it.
I like that. Yeah.
Like, and I want to watch film. Yeah, exactly. And I find myself wanting to gravitate. I want people that are pursuing art and creativity through YouTube who have a perspective on something, whether it's their photography, their painting, whatever. I don't want them to get caught up in everything that you see on Twitter and on articles in your Apple News feed and all these things that just talk about how to like hack YouTube and how to get subscribers and how to do this and how to increase your revenue and to really just like go crazy about the commerce side of it, how to figure out like, I think about it like a fine restaurant, right? Like a Michelin star restaurant. You go there, this person worked their whole life. They make this incredibly artistic, creative, well-crafted meal versus, a double cheeseburger from McDonald's, which you could argue is doesn't taste as good, but it does similar things to your brain when you eat it.
Yeah.
Because they had scientists figure out how to engineer these things with chemicals to make your brain respond, because they tested it on lab rats and all this stuff.
And at the same time, it's decaying your.
So I don't want people that really have something to say or a perspective to offer to be thinking, well, how do I hire my own scientists, to figure out what elements of my video are going to make people respond in very primitive ways and get addicted to it. And I just worry that we're seeing a platform that could have incredible artistic expression get overshadowed by all these thread boys on Twitter and the gamification and the vanity metrics and all that stuff. And I want more people like my brother who I don't give a shit if this gets 1 million views.
Yeah.
I see something in my mind, I made it, and I'm going to put it out there.
Yeah.
And do I want community? Do I want a response? Do I want to make more of it? Do I want people to enjoy it? Of course. But if it's not the #1 video of all time on YouTube, I'm not going to consider myself a failure.
I think it's interesting. I mean, first of all, this is what America does to everything, right? Anything we get our hands on, it's just, the incentive system that we have set up is going to push us to, let's make it more efficient. Let's make it, how do we metrics and how do we take all of the human aspects out of it? And
did you ever see Killing Them Softly with Brad Pitt?
I think I've watched is that James Gandolfini?
Yeah.
It's about the 2008, right? The financial crisis. Yeah.
And how, its
Lehman
impact
Brothers.
on some hitmen, but more not in a jokey way. Anyway, the one of the last scenes is Brad Pitt trying to get the full payment he's owed for the hit that he did, and they're having a conversation. Obama's on the TV, whatever, and Richard Jenkins says something to him, and he says, "America," something to the effect of, "America isn't a place; it's a business."
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, my I kind of got hit with that realization. I was a finance major in college, and partly because it was just it came pretty naturally to me, and I understood it. And I was like, this is going to be useful no matter what. But it wasn't necessarily, I was interested in photography and film, and didn't want to corrupt it as my innocent childlike whatever,
which I love about you, that we have these conversations about art and commerce, and I consider and when you told me you were a finance major, I was like, fascinating.
Well, somebody said, Audrey was talking to somebody the other week, and they're like, they had no idea you were finance. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I wanted to do the Wall Street thing, because I just thought it was interesting. I just thought it was wow, this is fascinating.
Do you think your fascination with it was the result of the art you consumed? Not you watched The Wolf of Wall Street and you're like, I want to be that guy.
Well, it's funny. That's actually what I'm getting to. But I mean, I was just fascinated with the mechanism of it.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated with the mechanism of American capitalism, and we just always have to do more and more and more and more. Then I saw The Wolf of Wall Street, and this is probably why Scorsese. So I mean, that was. I'd probably seen Goodfellas or something. Right. And then I saw that when I was this is college age. So I'm, 18?
Yeah,
probably
18, 19 years old.
And, that film really just changed my entire perspective. I was like, this is, and, you're doing that. And then I'm reading, I'm learning about the financial crisis. I'm reading all of this stuff. And it physically made me ill.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest problem, is that I have this I'll make a moral judgment on something, and I think I'd be a lot better off financially and just in terms of I'd probably be more quote unquote successful if I didn't have that. And I'm not trying to say that this sounds awful. I'm just hearing myself say these words. I'm like, this sounds terrible. I'm not trying to talk about it. I'm just making the observation. But I saw The Wolf of Wall Street, and I was like, wow, film can do that.
Yeah.
And I knew before, and I was at a distance, but I was like, that's really powerful. It just completely shifted. And I know Wolf of Wall Street, it's not I think it's a great film.
Yeah, I love it.
It really is. But I just, that paired with everything that I was consuming. I mean, I finished the degree, obviously, and I was still interested in it. It was came easy to me still, and I enjoy it, and I think it's a
Sure.
good thing to know. Like, you have to know how a system works if you're going to operate
Yeah.
within it, and I think, you know, it's absolutely beneficial. But no, I mean, seeing that, it's like, oh man, it's just disgusting how everything is. You just take it more and more and more until it destroys you.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened with YouTube. That's what's happened with anything good. I mean, you know, a lot of music, you have art that gets, whenever commerce comes in at a high enough level, I think it destroys things. And, you know, my take to YouTube has always been more of a, my dream is to create things that are like a Patagonia. Like, you're operating within the system, the financial incentive system. You're operating within this, you know, capitalist structure of that you have going on. But then you have your own thing that, you know, it's helping a lot of people. It's serving a lot of people. You're not too big. You're comfortable. Nobody's complaining. You're taking care of everybody. You're doing, you know, what I think is probably more good than harm. And I'm like, wow, that's the best way, I think. And, you know, you can't do that at a massive scale.
No.
You can only do that to a certain point. And I love artists that, you know, I think that's the secret to longevity with any artist is, and some of them get to like a super high point and then they even out. But, you know, it's just, you don't try to constantly seek more and more and more. You just find, and that doesn't mean you're not trying to be original. You're not pushing yourself and challenging everything and constantly evolving. That's not what that means. But you're not, you know, picking out a predetermined system of incentives and trying to exploit that.
Right.
Which is, I think that's what you get at like the highest level of YouTube or whatever. I'm interested so you talked about Vid Summit and you told me that story and I was just like, it sounds about right, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. Like, I was super curious. I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. And it was one of those situations where I was like, well, Matt's, you know, he's taking the time to go there. There's definitely probably something that's worth, you know.
And the thing that was worth it for me was going, ick.
Yeah.
I don't want to succumb to that approach, to like the Ray Kroc approach to building a restaurant that dominates the world, and going, how can I take these two men, and this is just based on, you know, what I've understood from a movie and articles and stuff, but how do I take what these two men created?
The book about him, I think.
Yeah, and the movie, of course, which, you know, again, you know, that's not, there's the truth and then there's whatever you see in a movie, but the gist of it being someone who saw an opportunity to take this mission-based approach to creating a hamburger restaurant and, you know, assembly lineify it into something that can take over the world. And then even beyond that, you know, the revelation that, well, let's not be a restaurant business, let's be a real estate business, and we'll buy the land and then the franchise system, like everything that was done to just like hack the system to make as much money as possible and to dominate the world. Like, that's not something I'm interested in with my approach to the work.
Do you think, I'm interested, there's so many things like bouncing around right now that just came from what you, but
like you said though, like, Patagonia, Leica, these brands that, like,
and I mean,
chill.
There are people that are like, Leica is gone to the side of the commercial. Like, there are people that say that just with the quality standards and licensing out stuff, you know, their brand name and things like that. But do you think there's a point, like, so we talked about Apple.
Yeah.
And, you know, Apple eventually, there's tons of people that would argue that they've already kind of sold out or whatever. I think there's also people that argue that they have stuck pretty close, but they already sold out in the 80s, you know, in the 1980s. And then they came back and said, hey, this is why we did this in the first place. Yep. Do you think that those are two things that can coexist? Or do you, like, you know, is Patagonia like as big as it gets? I mean, and I'm sure there's people out there that have a negative take on Patagonia. I don't know. I haven't talked to them recently, but I'm sure there's some people
Yeah.
out there. I'm sure there's good and bad with everything. But in terms of a company operating within a system and doing something really well and having a very strict set of values that they seem to hold to,
Right.
Over anything else, especially profit, do you think there's a level where you outgrow moral responsibility? Do you think it just money corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely? Like, what do you think? Like, if you got to 500,000 subscribers because you made 3 videos where you're, I teach homeless people how to edit.
Right. Yeah. Yes, exactly.
What? I just want to explore that a little bit. There's no direct question there, but I think you kind of have I saw some.
I mean, I think, whether it's a company, organization, an individual, these are the forces that are constantly at play in our lives. And, you're trying to, at least I am, try to deploy self-awareness, because you are going to have the culture of the world around you, America as a business, and the things that we see on social media and print and magazines, all the stuff that we are being sold the American dream, go buy a house, all this stuff. Like you're just being assaulted with companies and people in positions of power, that, you drink more milk, America needs to support the dairy farmers. So let's make a big ad campaign, got milk, to get people to buy more milk, and, those influences. So trying to deploy self-awareness and go, what forces are pulling me in one direction or another, and what's the truth behind that? Am I succumbing to pressure to be successful and have my retirement all situated, to have, a Ford Mach-E in my driveway next to a Honda Accord, like, 'cause that indicates amongst my peers that I'm doing well.
Yeah.
And if I feel like that pressure to obtain that is there, am I going to then make my content more of the McDonald's method to try to achieve those goals by making every video a 1 out of 10, figuring out what audiences are responding to with my content? Like we've talked about, I could do something on my channel that's like, a veteran editor tries to edit a YouTube video in a snowstorm, and like the thumbnail is me sitting at a makeshift desk out in a field that's covered in snow.
Or
like
I edit for 3 days straight.
Yeah, I'm gonna live stream. I'm gonna live edit on my live stream until I hit 50,000 subscribers, and if it takes me 47 days to do that, then so be it.
Yeah.
Like. What I mean? No. So like if you can ask yourself, how are the forces in the world and our culture impressing upon you, and then making you consider certain ways of expressing yourself, or commerceifying your art, whatever. You have to have that conversation with yourself. What is making me do this? I made one video on my channel that was essentially a copy of another Final Cut Pro YouTuber's video, where he looked at a YouTube video from a big creator where he was working in Final Cut Pro and was missing a lot of key things. Yeah. And so he made a video that was essentially like, this person's editing wrong, here are some tips to help that person out. That video took off. So I went, well, I can do a video like that as well.
Yeah.
So Marquez Brownlee had a video where he showed his screen in Final Cut, and there were some things he was doing that was quote unquote wrong. Maybe not doing things as designed in Final Cut. And so I made a similar video, and of course that video took off. But then I felt
what are your thoughts on it now?
About what I did, because I just saw the playbook of what another content creator had done that I thought was a really good idea. And I essentially copied that and did my version of it, because I felt like I wanted those kinds of views too, or I wanted a 1 out of 10 video. Yeah. So I think, for me, it vacillates back and forth. Like I sometimes succumb to the pressures of vanity metrics, or or wanting my in-laws to see me as successful because I you know, if they sum up what I do, like, okay, there's a 44-year-old guy who makes videos in his basement. Like, how are you actually supporting your family and, you know, from a finance side, doing the things that you're supposed to do to have retirement and savings and college for your kids and all this stuff. So you always have those forces at play.
And I think there's always, no matter how, you know, sentimental we want to, you know, look at it, there's always two options. And I think you nailed it when you said employ the self-awareness and ask yourself, why are you doing it? And you honestly ask yourself, why are you doing it? Because sometimes the answer to the why is, I want to be famous.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be famous. You know, do I agree with it? Maybe not. Maybe. Do I think that there's anything in? It's just like any desire. It's like wanting to create whatever, wanting to have a child, wanting to have a family. It's, you know, it's just another thing. But if you want to be famous and you're saying, I want to be a great photographer, that's not the same thing.
Right.
If you're saying I want to be famous or I want to be a great musician, that's not the same thing.
No.
And so,
or I want to be rich.
I want to be rich. That's a big one in, especially in America.
Rich and famous.
Rich and famous, right? It's the American. I think that's the
playbook.
American. Yeah, that's the real
Get famous
corrupted
or
American
infamous.
dream is fame and celebrity and wealth and, you know, but you have to look at that and you have to honestly ask yourself, is this what I want? And then if it is, look at the upside, look at the downside.
Yeah.
And really determine, because a lot of people say, I want to be rich and famous, and then they chase it and they either get it and realize they don't want it because they never considered the downside, or they don't get it and they throw away all of this time that they could have been focusing on something else because they were seeking this thing that they didn't actually want in the first place, and then they never get it anyways. I don't know why the Jim Carrey quote just popped into my head, right?
Yeah.
Where his dad, what did his dad do? His dad, this isn't exactly, but it popped into my head where, you know, his dad failed at, he was an accountant and he got fired. And he's like, my dad compromised to be an accountant and got fired from that.
Yeah.
So, you know, you can fail at anything, you can succeed at anything, but make sure at least you're striving for something that you do want.
Right.
That way, you know.
But but you also just have to embrace the reality, I think, and this is my own personal experience, that you're going to shift between altruism and selfishness, and, you know, like, you're going to touch on all those in a ever flowing kind of storm of things that are pulling you
Constant
in certain directions.
Evolution or influences.
And we've talked about this with your channel. You know that you could succumb to YouTube Studio, or you could succumb to making a video that is simply to get you over the threshold to become monetized on YouTube, versus I have something to say, or this is something I'm really passionate about or interested in or whatever. And I don't know it's going to get any views or get any watch hours or whatever, but I know I have to make this video.
Well, and I feel like if you violate that trust once, and this is just my opinion, but I feel like if you violate that trust once, and this is not a trust between me and an audience, this is, in my case, is a trust between me and myself.
Right.
And once I give myself permission to violate that, I'm going to continue to violate it. You know, I can't trust myself
each time.
Yeah.
As you go down that, you know, start sliding down the slippery slope of fame, rich, success, American success, or what we perceive as
and you know,
success.
what is trust? We talked about journalism a little bit earlier, and that's the biggest problem that a lot of these legacy journalism or legacy media or whatever, the biggest problem they're facing is they violated that trust one time, and they violated it a second time, and 2 times is plenty. Once you do it more than that, though, how can you ever ask to be taken seriously again, especially when now there's all these independent alternatives popping up with YouTube, and so, you know, you can't you have to really consider. I don't know. I almost do recommend just taking the time. I know people say just start, just go. And I think while I do think that's good advice, I think at the same time, good advice might be, and I want to hear your thoughts on this to get a second opinion, but I think good advice might be spend some time. It's the Dylan quote. I'll know my song well before I start singing. Make sure that you're at least, you don't have to pick a thing and then keep doing it and just go towards that thing. But at least make sure that the direction you're going is somewhat, and maybe you have a complete direction shift.
Yeah.
Maybe that happens, but I don't know. I feel like you should at least try to align yourself in the right path.
Yeah.
This has got a little deeper. Yeah. There's a perfect bridge to our next topic too. I'm just holding it. So,
I think it just, something I'm just always fascinated with when it comes to other people who are creative, or artists, but then some of them who really embrace the commerce side. In a Patagonia, like that kind of North Star brand that feels like it is finding a balance between its mission and convictions.
Absolutely.
As well as trying to run a profitable business that provides valuable products and employs people and helps, in ways, whether it's working with charities or whatever. But again, doing those things, not, coming to those decisions because it feels like the natural next step, not it's the playbook that gets your company to the next level.
Yeah. It's like a shining star and they're just doing their own thing.
Yeah. Like it comes from a more truthful place, that even though they may understand if we do this charitable thing as, let's say, Patagonia, we know that it's going to get us some vanity metrics as a result. Like people are going to have a stronger emotional connection to us. Maybe more people follow us on social media, whatever it is. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we're doing this not because of those results. We're doing it because it feels like the right thing to do. And, just to kind of bring everything back to the whole Vid Summit thing, like I stepped away from that. No judgment of the content creators and all that. I don't sit there and think about, Ryan Trahan or Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson, and go, personally, I don't think like you are, you might as well be Lex Luthor with what you're doing because, what you're doing is going to cost us a lot more than it's going to benefit us. But I just wonder for those individuals, what is it deep inside of them that makes them so obsessed with having, the number one video views wise in a 24-hour period, or like trying to understand these different tactics that will yield more followers. Like Jimmy Donaldson was talking in an interview with Colin and Samir about getting a show on Netflix. And one of the things he said was not necessarily why he's doing it, but he sort of just casually threw out there are a lot of people on Netflix that don't watch YouTube. So if they see me on Netflix, maybe they'll come over to YouTube and start consuming my content there because they like my show on Netflix. And I just sit there and I go, is the foundation of your motivation to partner with a streaming service to get more subscribers onto your channel from places, where maybe the demographic isn't in touch with YouTube? Like, are you going to start touring retirement communities and buying them Apple TVs and Rokus so that they can understand and like teaching them what YouTube is and how to use it? And then they'll find your videos about a $1 yacht versus $100 million yacht and find entertainment. Like, well, I don't want to sit here and assume that Jimmy's sole motivation is world domination and being the greatest YouTuber of all time or the most subscribers or the most views or whatever. But if I was like telling his story or doing the Wolf of Wall Street on Jimmy Donaldson, like what is the obsession with that? What was Ray Kroc's obsession with having this hamburger restaurant literally have a franchise location on every continent, maybe he was realistic and not expecting there to be a McDonald's in Antarctica, but I'm sure the thought crossed his mind.
Well, and McDonald's works with charities, but they're not a charity.
Well, the Ronald McDonald Charity, and
which I didn't know was separate.
Yeah.
From McDonald's,
and it may have had to have been spun off. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what? But then I sit there and go, was it spun off?
But
because
what
of some
I'm
corporate-
like, McDonald's does a lot of good, and it's like, where do you balance that? But McDonald's does a lot of bad too, and if you net that out, what does that look like? And the same with the videos. And again, I don't. We talked before. My concern is I don't want to turn this into like just complaining about this or that. But I think, you want to. Why are you continuing to do what you're doing? And then, my personal opinion, and I've heard this. I've had people tell me this, and it's a lesson that I've had to learn, and I don't even know if I've quite learned it yet. But generally, whenever you're, that voice inside of your head, that's yourself, that's your ego talking. And I don't want to get into some, big ego, but I do think that a lot of really great work comes from a place where you've stepped out of that self, that ego, and you've kind of worked to understand something or see something through somebody else's eyes, or just see something as like a singularity. You've kind of escaped that very fixed perspective.
Right.
We talk about that as photography. The camera is its own perspective.
Right.
And when I get to these, I just got to be the biggest, greatest. And I hate this stupid like GOAT, greatest of all time thing that has become so popular over the last
Who's the GOAT?
5 years. Who's the GOAT?
Everything.
I hate it. Like, it's such a terrible, because first of all, that's a linear thing. There's only one person that can be at the top, and we've just turned into I mean, you said it earlier, such a binary culture.
Yeah.
Everything has to just be the greatest of all time, the best ever, and it's got to be the biggest, the largest,
the most Academy Awards, the most Super Bowl championship rings, and all that stuff.
And I don't think any of that. I mean, there's people out there that want to fill, and there's always going to be people that fill those. But I don't think that's a very rewarding, like,
well,
you can get reward out of it, but I don't know. I think some of the most meaning, like, do you think, I don't know, like, look at these historical, you think Martin Luther King's walking around like, I'm going to be the greatest activist of all time?
Yeah.
Or do you think, like,
no,
I mean, like,
But
Jesus Christ is like, I'm going to be the greatest Messiah of all time. Like, or you have these great figures throughout history, that have really contributed. And I don't think that's even a question for them. But then, you have like Michael Jordan, who's like, I'm going to be the greatest. But then, I don't know.
Well, and that's the thing, gamification, like the easiest thing to look at is, football, basketball, all these records, world championships, rings, like how much of that was part of Michael Jordan's, art expression, the masterpieces he created on the court and, his competitive nature. I mean, if you've watched the documentary on Netflix, which is great, he was just as competitive playing a quarter game with the securities guys as he was
when he was on the
court. And, was just winning a game enough, or was it, I just think what's interesting is it opens up a conversation about greater human psychology and the things that motivate us. And like you said, ego, like, someone with a dominant, prominent ego, what is motivating them, and how does that sort of how does that counter someone who, if it even exists, someone who is doing something more out of a true artistic expression, that it's not about the self, it's not about that they can just go out with a paintbrush or a hunk of clay, or like if somebody develops a following and they start something like Martin Luther King, like has convictions and a mission, and he's pursuing justice and peace and equality, but then fame starts to enter in and other things. Like, what do those forces do to taint or corrupt or affect those convictions?
I love some of the stories where you have people who you would probably identify as artistic types that become, somehow they catch the zeitgeist, they become massively influential or famous.
You hear that expression, like, it's bigger than me now. This thing is
Well,
bigger than me.
I mean, I think of, like, I don't know who in recent, like, Kendrick Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
Like, my mom knows who Kendrick Lamar is.
Right.
You know, my grandma probably knows who Kendrick Lamar is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe that they don't know the music, but they know of him. They know he's a character. I'm sure the same with, you know, and these, you know, Kendrick Lamar is this massive name. And I think all he really cares about is making music. He doesn't make public appearances very often.
Right.
He doesn't do interviews ever. He puts out an album every 3 years, and he never puts it out until it's like right, you know, he's picked every detail over it, whatever. He doesn't get on social media. I think he, even during the last thing, he's like, yeah, I got rid of my phone. Like, I don't have a cell phone. I have a landline.
And I wonder how much,
Like Bill Murray, like, right? You hear about Bill Murray when he was at the height,
right?
Just comet exploding through space, and he's just like, yeah, you have to call my agent, who then is the sole person to have my landline.
Right. And how much of that is not wanting, like we talked about earlier, those pressures to affect the motivation,
the work,
or what, you know.
Oh man, you've
just
you lifted up a rug that.
So like Banksy, right? He's
Yeah.
you know, who knows, is an anonymous artist that creates these things spontaneously, and there's huge gaps between when one of his or her paintings show up.
Well, so
and is part of that. I don't want fame and these things that get attached to my personal identity to impact how I create my artistic expression. And that to me is, you know, again, I don't know what like the right way to do it, but you could argue that there's like the Banksy playbook. If you want to be an artist that appears to do this altruistically and for the purity of the art and blah, 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 but your stuff becomes famous, and if like people could like cut the wall out of the side of the building and sell it, they would.
Quote where it's like, I think your shtick is pretending you don't have a shtick.
Yeah. And he's made, you know, Banksy's even making art on things that people can't possess. Like, sure, the person who owns the building like now has a Banksy, but in a sense, but you know, like even when you put something on canvas, like, is that like, you know, sure, it's your medium, but is that like putting it on YouTube? Like, it's meant to sell it.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting. And you talked about the you know, the persona getting bigger than the
this thing's bigger than me now. Like, and now that pressure is making me
literally, I'm wearing the 100, and this was not planned out, but it's perfect. I've been, you know, I've always been a pretty big Hunter Thompson fan, and I've been revisiting a lot of his stuff. And I mean, Hunter Thompson is just caricaturized in that, like, Raoul Duke, crazy, doing all the drugs. And towards the end of his life, I think he even felt a need to embody that. Yeah. Like, this is the thing I am. I have to embody this character that was created. But like he didn't write Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas while he was drugged out of his mind. He just did. Like, you read it and you're like, this is absolutely brilliant. You know, this wasn't written by a guy who's just tweaking out of their mind. Like, and you can read he was an extremely thoughtful person. And he, you know, gonzo journalism, he talks about covering the Carter campaign for Rolling Stone, and he's like, I was signing more autographs than Jimmy Carter, because he was that. Yeah. And he talks about it all the time. Just at a certain point, the persona that the work had created around me became more than, like, it started to interfere with me covering the event. And it's this idea, right, of, you know, if you're a photographer and you're like, oh, I love photography, but I want to be a famous photographer. And you become a famous photographer. Well, famous people can't just go exist in the street and be inconspicuous and disappear.
Yep.
And isn't that kind of the point of photography? So you have these two things that you want, and they compete against each other. And Thompson, he just wanted to write, and but then I'm sure he was fascinated by the intricacies of being famous or being like this. He created this intense Raoul Duke personality and had to embody that. His drug routine is passed around, and there's no way a human could do that many drugs. They would die.
Yeah.
But that was the persona that he created. And yeah, it started to interfere where he's like, how is my presence at these events changing
the
event?
Yeah.
And, you get that with music, like how is my presence changing my observation, or how is you have somebody like Jay-Z who their career started by bringing this experience of living in the streets and growing up as like, I'm a hustler, and like he was a drug dealer, and then he brings that in and he shares that perspective, and it's like, then he's rich.
Yeah.
And now he's been rich at the highest level of success longer than he was in that life. Mm-hmm. So where does that change the work? And you have the same thing with I think the photography example is interesting. At a certain point, oh my gosh, this person's walking around taking photos right now. It's like, so do you really want to be a celebrity, or do you want to be a photographer? Because if you achieve both of those things at a high level, they start to...
Yeah. And again, what does that celebrity or fame or fortune impact? How does it corrupt your, if it's even possible, your pure and truthful and honest reason for doing the work. So here's something that brings it full circle to your channel. One thing popped into my head. This isn't for your channel.
Hey, that we're talking about my channel right now.
Just but you brought up Hunter Thompson. Like, this thing got bigger than me. Catcher in the Rye with J.D. Salinger. I don't know why he isolated himself, but I would think the explosion of that book and everybody thinking maybe he has the answers to all the questions they have, and then him, isolating himself, still writing, but not sharing his work.
You're a prophet, right? The same thing with Dylan is you're a prophet now. So tell us how to feel. Tell us what we need to.
So speaking of prophets, and again, coming back to your channel, what movie and part of why it's probably as successful as it is, gives us a character who rejects all that, who doesn't succumb, who is pure in everything that he does.
Yeah.
Who?
I mean, you're gonna have to. I'm not plugging that video on here.
Okay. So and it just dawned on me as we talked about this, but think about Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
The scene where he's running, across the desert, they do the montage, he back and forth. His beard grows long. All of us, he has all these people following him. They don't know why.
I got a better one for. I think the key philosophy that I outlined in that video was stoicism. So go watch Forrest Gump. Don't watch my video on it. But if you want to learn about stoicism, read Marcus Aurelius, or just learn about observing, letting events happen to you. I heard something where it's like, think of life as an ocean and you're just on a raft, and sometimes the waves are big, sometimes they're calm.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to approach things. And for the most part.
And I think
it's my one opinion, though.
We're drawn to the story of Forrest because we feel like everything he does is motivated by purity. Just pure. He just stops running. Why'd you stop? I felt like stopping. Yeah. And he's not even none of that stuff permeates. He doesn't look back and see everybody running behind him and go, okay, well, how can I monetize this? How can I? Well, and how can I do all these things?
I think that example is, or that the reason I made that video. That was the thing I was trying to highlight is, you have these two things, and one of them gets all of this applause and whatever, while it is kind of clearly superficially searching for these things. It's doing the metrics, even if they're original metrics. It's it's trying to, and it's, we ignore this really useful, but also, it's not like Forrest Gump invented that philosophy.
No, no, but I think, who knows, it could be in a conscious way, a subconscious way, but, was that book written? Was that movie made? Because it, have we watched it all these years? Do you get sucked in, back when it was on cable? Because you don't know why necessarily, but there's something about the purity of his intentions that is the opposite, in a sense, of what we deal with, which is, I think sometimes we can have pure intentions for a flash, and then other times we have, I don't know if corrupt is the right word, but personal gain, self-enrichment, letting the pressure of that's on us culturally to have a bigger house or to have a better lawn or to have nicer cars and compromise our convictions in order to obtain that. And you see stories about that all the time, from church leaders to politicians to all this stuff. Look at everything that's going on with Clarence Thomas, and the Supreme Court justice, and all the little parties and gifts he's been given by billionaires. He's supposed to be someone that is untouched by the outside world, in a sense, when bringing his judgments to bear on these cases. But when you see I'm in a position of power, how can I leverage that to have personal gain or to go against my convictions and my oath? And do something that, even though it may not be criminal, it may not even be full-blown unethical and warranting impeachment, but it's not what you should be doing. It's like that. It's unfortunate that happened. It's not just a political thing. That happens at every level. Once you reach a certain point, there's other people that are going to try to utilize you for their personal gain. Mm-hmm. And I think, and when you have something that's of value to other people, power, access. Well, whatever.
even you and I sit down talking about like, oh, we can leverage, this. And,
absolutely.
We'll have conversations with. There is no ill intention, but at the same time, I always think of like the unhappy socialist, right? It's like socialism. You have the socialists, and they're like, yeah, socialism is the answer, and it's great, and all you have to do is dedicate your whole entire life to this, to just carrying out your movement, and no family, no anything, and it's like some people have the ability to do that. Some people feel that strongly about a cause, but I think, if I had to speak my opinion on it, I think you need to sit down, spend the time employing the self-awareness of what you want. And I think it's just, you got to lay out some core values, and maybe that's honesty. Maybe that's, you just have to lay out some things that you're never willing to compromise on.
And I think that
it can be 1, 2, or 3 things. And then every situation that you're in, you have to put situation up against those values. And
is this thing that's coming at me, does it move me? Does it keep me with these core values, or does it move me?
And don't push the goalposts. And I think that's what I was telling you earlier. It's just like, I've got this agreement between me and myself. Yeah, it's like if I break it once, it's over. I'm gonna break it every time. Yep. So, you're on a diet and you drive by Taco Bell and you're like, damn, that sounds pretty good. I'm just going to do it this one time.
And I do that.
And then you do it. And, once you break the seal's broken. So, I don't know. But it is easier, though. Like, you can just decide, this is how I'm going to do things. And suddenly you don't have micro decisions to make. You just have a macro kind of ideology that fits into. I don't know. Don't take my advice, do it.
But you were never going to be perfect at it. You put those core values. And that's the thing we need. We can't sit there and go, well, if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm not going to bother. But we can't also go, if I don't do it perfectly, I'm going to beat the shit out of myself.
Absolutely, yeah. And
because you're denying your own humanity,
right? And where's that balance between that accountability and the You know what I'm like? Yeah. There has to be a balance between that accountability of you fucked up.
Yeah.
You fuck, like, you messed up, and you're not gonna. And I think, like, you know, with you and I, it's like, I think, there are some things that and Taco Bell's a small thing.
Sure.
I think you can afford to fuck up on that, but I do think there are some things, and I think, if you are decisive enough on the direction of your work, I think that should probably be one of them, where it's like you and I aren't gonna, we're not, we might mess up and go to Taco Bell, but we're not gonna, cheat on our spouse or something to such a large extent. And, those are two different things. While it's the same concept, like, oh, I might go to Taco Bell and break the diet, that's small potatoes compared to this other thing. And I think, so you do have areas where you're willing to set hard lines. And I think, asking yourself the important questions and determining what those lines are for your work can be an important step. I don't know if it's necessarily a necessary step, but I think it can be an important step to just define and give you a sense of direction with the work.
And for me, I think the beauty of an artist is whether they are sort of knowingly doing this or more instinctively or subconsciously doing this, is when you do break from that conviction, or you do have an affair, or you do cheat and have Taco Bell. To me, the artists, again, whether they do it knowingly or more subconsciously, they go, why?
Yeah, I need to explore this.
Why?
Absolutely.
And, obviously we can deploy self-awareness for ourselves. I know the reason I essentially copied my friend's Final Cut video was I felt I was in a bad place because I had a bunch of videos that weren't doing well. I felt like I deserved videos that got those kind of views. Like, you can really see that there's some dark things or some unbecoming things about your personality that came out in that situation.
That's a great point.
And that's why I love photography, because I feel like I can go out in the world and I can photograph those moments where someone
you can
is
try
on
to explore that.
The good thing is happening.
Like how you tied this back into a nice little bow for the end.
and somebody, and maybe there's, whether it's a moment of conflict or heatedness, or or, a moment after a politician gives a speech and there's something happening and you catch like you're capturing some of like a physical representation of a why.
I read this thing the other day that I think ties up. It's like the best words that have never been written.
Yes. Yeah.
Or the best description that was never written is what photography is. Yeah. And I'm like, that's a pretty good. Yep. And I think I absolutely agree with you. I'm willing to forgive most anything that a human does if they're willing to honestly explore why they did it.
Yep.
Even to extents that I'm sure people would probably disagree with me on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fascinating. I don't think humanity's all we have, especially as technology and the ability to do things with syntax and with large language models and things like that. We have less and less that is unique, but our humanity is still something that's untouched. And I'm not trying to cut off a response to that, but I think this is a good part to do the wrap up.
That's right. I think so too.
That was good. That was good. I'm sorry. So we didn't have, we had like a couple of things that we were going to talk about, and we kind of just went off the rails. Some episodes are going to do that. Some are going to have more structure.
Well, that's the fun. The interesting thing about this is in the planning ahead of time, we talk about this needs to be 55 minutes. We sort of put these constraints because there's outside pressure, right? We don't want it to be too much longer. Maybe there's more editing involved, these other things. But then on the flip side, the sort of truth of our conversation, like how do you deny where a conversation goes because of, you could argue, these artificial limitations you're
Yeah.
putting on something.
Well, and I think a lot of people have this idea that a conversation has to achieve. There has to be, conversation is a means to an end. And while I don't disagree with that, I don't necessarily think that end is always going to occur
Right.
within a 55-minute segment.
No, yeah. And sometimes it's worth going out of that
Yeah.
boundary, and other times,
I think
we
it's
just
worth
need to.
putting words to ideas that
Yeah.
maybe we don't discover maybe there wasn't a point to this, but maybe we don't
Right.
discover the takeaway in this episode or the next episode, but maybe somebody listening heard something that connected another thought that they'd had a
Absolutely.
few months ago. And I think that's the point of, that's the beauty of long form conversation. I think that's what
Yep.
kind of attracts us. So just
What didn't
we had
talk
2
about?
points, so we're really cheating here because we're, we had like 6 the first time,
Yeah.
and it's like 1.2 out of 6. We just
I
figured
know.
that we never hit any of them, so we've adapted. Oh wait, I don't even think we hit. Is this? Oh shit.
I don't think we really hit any of them.
So we had color and black and white, and we definitely didn't touch that. And then
Like-
how do we remark on things? Oh my gosh, I forgot to put the commerce thing down.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a
Yep.
post.
Yeah.
So we did say we're gonna start with commerce art,
We did. Yeah.
and we stuck on it the whole time.
Yep.
But still, I mean, we're like
Yeah.
1 out of 3, and I don't even think.
Yeah.
Like, did we cover commerce and art, or is that like a 0.7 or a 0.6?
Yeah. I mean,
It's like a point.
I think if we titled this episode like the intersection between art and commerce, and then people listen to it,
Yeah.
they would be like,
Yeah, you
this
guys
is
didn't
related
really.
to that. It touches on that, but you didn't really like tackle
Which
art and commerce.
gets to our other titling episode.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get I don't know. You give it. You give us the rating.
like a 0.7 out of 3. Is
Yeah.
that how we're doing it? Like
Yeah,
0.7?
0.7 out of 3.
Yeah.
Well, good job, bud.
Yeah. You too, buddy.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer and summer.